Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for joining today. So my name again is Aly Pinder. IDC is a research organization. My job is to not just look good in a suit, which I rarely do, but it's to do research about executives like everyone in this room. My goal isn't to tell you about my perspective necessarily, but to walk you through a lot of the data that is driving a lot of the decisions that you're thinking about in your day-to-day roles. A little bit of background, I've been covering field service in the aftermarket for about 17 years now. I am a soccer fan. I root for Tottenham, so for those of you in the audience, Postecoglou is my favorite manager. We're sad that we sacked him, but he did bring us a Europa League championship. First time to Sydney, Australia. I have been enjoying myself. One of the bigger things I've enjoyed is I often get to see Aussies in other places, so it's good to come here and actually enjoy the experience of the culture here today. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I'll walk you through a lot of the trends that I'm seeing in the market, looking at the challenges that are facing field service organizations, provide you with some insight into some market trends. So what I want to make sure you understand today is the trends I'm going to show to you don't only come from enterprises out in the market. A lot of the data I was able to cut based off of company size, number of technicians, to look at SMB mid-market organizations. So don't think about a lot of the data that you see in a vacuum that is only enterprises or the most mature companies in the world. I think a lot of those of you in this room are doing some fairly innovative things, and I want to highlight a lot of that in some of the data that you're going to see. I also want to provide you with some insight into what maturity looks like. I think of maturity as a continuum, right? We're all starting our journey today or maybe 5 years ago, and it's important to think that nothing you're doing right now is wrong, but you may be a little bit behind some of your peers. So I want to provide you with some context as to what we're seeing in the marketplace. We've talked a lot today, and I know this is the last session before we get to have a beer or, in my case, a bourbon. But it's important to continue to talk about how innovation and technology can drive your businesses forward to get at that value proposition that Fred talked about earlier today. And we'll wrap up with some takeaways and some recommendations, and we might have time for a couple questions. So what's keeping all of us up at night when we think about our field service organizations? First and foremost, when we sampled nearly 300 organizations, was a desire and a need to not just think about how the silo of field service is working on its own, but how we're able to communicate, share data across the business, collaborate better to ensure that we're not just having technicians go out and be a hero, that second responder by themselves, but how the entire organization can deliver value to a business. How we can not just sell service, but sell the value that's wrapped around that to a certain set of customers that can do something different. We also find that much of the conversation we've had over the last few hours has been tied to how service and field service can actually drive at revenue streams for our businesses. How often are we thinking about not just delivering that hero on site, but actually driving margin from those experiences and that value that a company is willing to pay for? We also find that a number of the sessions just before us talked about key metrics around retention, NPS being Net Promoter Score, an idea that retaining a customer is easier than finding a new one. A lot of the executives I talked to today are really rethinking the metrics that are driving the success of their businesses. Rethinking not just about having operational efficiency goals, where we're trying to shrink mean time to resolution or improve first time fix, which are obviously great metrics, but really thinking about how the customer experience is what's going to drive our continued success. If we have happy customers, will they not buy more from us? We hope so. Will they not recommend us to a peer so that we can grow new business? I think really thinking about ways in which you can excel at customer metrics, customer-focused metrics, will drive your businesses forward. And last but not least, I think all of us understand a need to get better at service. We can't retain that customer if they're continuously seeing worse service from us. So a lot of the challenges that we continue to talk about within our trends, within our data, is finding out how we can better communicate across the business, how we can drive at revenue through having happier customers, and how delivering better quality outcomes will drive all of these forward. When we looked at solving a lot of those problems earlier, one thing that continued to come back across our data was the fact that our employees are actually the people that are going to deliver on these new sets of outcomes and this level of excellence that we want to deliver to our customers. One thing that I think is really interesting when we have a technology analyst who covers technology at a technology conference is the fact that often we forget about the humans that are doing the work, providing our technicians with the right information and insights on not only the products that they're fixing, but also on the customers they're serving. Do our technicians recognize what room are they walking into? What type of relationship are they getting into when they get on site? Do we know, as a technician, that that contract's up for renewal in 6 weeks? Do we know that that asset that we're putting our hands on, oftentimes the technician that came there 2 weeks ago is the one that broke it, right? When I think about the plumbers that come to my house, oftentimes the plumber that shows up is like, yeah, plumber Bob over there, he does a bad job often. I'm fixing his work, right? But unless we know what has happened before, what's the service history that was engaged, our technicians are coming to these conversations with poor discussions. They're not showing the value of the brand to the customer. They're not having the right conversations. And I think really understanding how you can better train your technicians, provide them with real-time insight and information on who they're servicing and what they're servicing can really drive your businesses forward. A lot of trends on this slide, a lot of words on this slide. One thing to take into account as you engage with analysts is we like to have predictions. We like to think that we're really smart. Don't quote me on these in a year from now when you look back on some of these slides, but we like to track where the market is going. What is driving businesses to rethink their organizations, rethink their strategy, rethink what technologies they should be investing in. Customer expectations continue to evolve. This is nothing new to any of us in this room. Your customers are going to continue to expect more from you than what they maybe even paid for last week. What's on that contract that they signed 6 months ago isn't necessarily what they're expecting today because they're continuing to evolve their businesses, and it's important for you to continue to evolve with them. We continue to see the fact that artificial intelligence has been discussed quite a bit already today. It is often a buzz term that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. It becomes something that means everything to everyone. We like to think about AI as the techniques that allow for computers to mimic human behavior. You'll also hear from me about generative AI, which in a lot of ways, it's the summarizations that your technicians can have pre-visit when they can see what's happened before, what should they be recommended from a conversation perspective, and what is the next step that they should put in place. There's something even further out that we won't talk a lot about, but it's AI agents, so non-human agents. But this is the way in which technology can orchestrate processes and workflows behind the scenes. So your technicians don't have to go out and call the salesperson and say, I got on site and I saw there's 3 sensors over there that aren't under service contracts. You should really talk to them. It's a way in which in the background, your marketing teams can engage a customer with a more personalized experience because that technician got on site and saw, man, these assets over here are not working really well for them, or they're not trained properly on how to use this product, which is why I'm coming out over and over again. Why not market to them a discount on an increased service contract, more of a go-level standard contract? We're also finding that organizations are thinking differently about how technology can evolve the way in which the workforce is trained. I think of AI as an augmentation to work, not displacement of work. A lot of your technicians may be fearful around AI. You may be fearful of AI if you think it's going to take your job away. But if it's actually a way in which you can augment the work that you're doing to supercharge and make you into more of a superhero, it's something you might actually embrace. Data. One of the bigger challenges I see for most of you in this room moving forward is not the fact that you don't have enough data, it's you don't have the insights to do the stuff you need to do with all the data. The way to read this slide is today, most of the peers in this room feel like about half of your assets, products, and equipment are connected, providing you with somewhat of a real-time data flow around how you can get access to performance, get access to what's going to fail, what's the defect. In 3 years, these same executives that took part in the survey think they're going to be nearly 7 out of 10 of the assets they have in place will be fully connected. That's a whole lot more data that is now going into your systems that you're not doing anything with unless you prepare for it. Where I think the opportunity is, and it's not necessarily about which technology firm you work with, it's the understanding that your teams should have access to intelligence, access to insights, not just capturing more data that's going to go in a back office system that no one's going to act on. When I think about all of these things, it's important to recognize the fact that we have a lot of balls that we're trying to juggle in the air at the same time. It's important to understand that we need to evolve with our customers. We're dealing with disjointed systems that don't talk to each other. The sales team doesn't know what the marketing team is doing. No one knows what the service technician that's out there on his own is doing. Oftentimes, there's a disparity between customer value, a gap between what your customers expect to get from the contracts that they assign to you and the value that your technicians are delivering. And unless you close that gap, there's not going to be a renewal to that contract. We're also finding that when some of you work through dealer networks or have partners, work through contractors, that there's a disparity between the technology that is being used by the variety of stakeholders that you're engaging with. Without having aligned tools, you're going to have different conversations. You're going to have different recommendations because you're not dealing with the same amount of data. We also find that, as we discussed earlier today, innovation's moving pretty quickly. If I think back to 5 years ago, maybe 15 years ago when I started in this space, most of you in this room had paper-based processes that your technicians were going through. They had a checklist that they were going down to make sure they did their safety checks, make sure they looked at this meter, had this meter reading in this location, make sure they logged these consumables that they used. Today, we should have all that on an application, right? You should have multiple applications that are doing multiple things that allow for a technician to do a lot. Innovation's moving so fast that we can't keep up with all the insights that we should have available to us. So you flip those challenges and think about the opportunity that we all have in this room if we rethink the way in which we can engage with the systems, the people, and technology that we have in place. It's important to understand, with this insight into our customer, why are we not improving the services that we're delivering to them? Can we not take this insight that we've seen from the engagements that our technicians have and loop that back into the services we offer, the relationships our technicians have with our customers, and the value we're delivering to these organizations to ensure that they're able to drive at that better than 10% profit margin that Fred talked about earlier today? Is there a way to take all of the data and systems we have and integrate technology to ensure that we're able to make decisions based off of more than just what our technicians see in that individual engagement? Can we not scale that intelligence across the business so we're ensuring that multiple teams are no longer working through silos of business, but we're all engaging through one single view of a customer or an asset? Can we rethink the metrics that we're measuring so that we're able to have shared value across our customers, our suppliers, our dealers, our contractors, and our back office systems? So we're all thinking about which metrics drive value for the entire business and not just for our individual bottom line. That next piece around thinking about buy-in, one of the areas that I know we just mentioned or 2 sessions ago on a panel was thinking about the fact that too often we send technology down to the users and tell them to just use it. It's going to be valuable for you. It's going to improve your day. One of the things I struggle with sometimes is thinking that when we give someone technology, we can say you can do more things. Who in their life wants to do more jobs in their day? You want your jobs to be easier for you. You want to gain more value from the tools you have. You don't necessarily want to do more things. So telling your technicians, yeah, you can go from doing 3 jobs to 5 jobs, unless you tell them the value around doing those 5 more jobs, that you're solving customer stories, you're delivering better outcomes to your customers, they're just going to see that as one more application, one more tool, one more device in their pocket that's going to force them to stress themselves out more. I really think re-engaging your technicians to understand how technology can help them engage their customers better and deliver better value will help you improve adoption. It does us no good if we're buying new technology, delivering technicians with more devices, and they're bypassing that, going back into the bed of their car to write down the list of everything they did as opposed to in real time leveraging the application to solve a problem. Another thing is, don't just listen to me. I have throughout this a few different quotes that I pulled from executives as I've been surveying organizations. One thing that I do think is really critical and important is to understand your worker profile, understand what your customers demand, and understand what skills you should be hiring for and what skills you can train for. really having an understanding of what is important in your market. There was a discussion around Zennials and Millennials. I think I'm Gen Y, maybe X. I know I look young, but I think it's important to recognize what's the value that your workforce is looking for from you. Are they coming to your organization to solve problems or to do hard work? They're coming to do both. Do they want to engage with customers? What are the skills that you can't hire? What skills are most competitive in your market, and make sure that you solve those first. So what are some trends impacting the market? First and foremost, I do think data should be at the core of what's driving excellence within your business. Again, most of the organizations in this room will move from half of the equipment being connected today to nearly 7 out of 10 assets being connected. But what are you going to do with that data? Is it just more data, or is it actually driving excellence within your field service business? And with that, are you able to segment and understand the difference between your customers and the assets that they have installed in their businesses? Can you understand that your customer may have bought something from you 10 years ago that really isn't solving the problems of their businesses today? Can you ensure that you're able to get insights regardless of where that data is coming from to ensure your technicians make the right decisions at the point of service need? This is a really important one. When we think about moving above that 10% profit margin curve, and again, I'm going to steal that data point because I haven't captured it on my own, so don't quote me on it outside of this, but I'll quote it here because Fred mentioned it earlier. Too often we discount the value of our workforce and the value of the brand that they're building for your businesses. Going back to ensuring that your workers are being compensated well, it's hard to find quality work. And if you're viewing your technicians and your workers as another resource, like a consumable, like a part, they're going to go someplace else. It's important to recognize that your technicians often are the brand of your organization. I assume most of you know that's in the room, and hopefully there are not too many blank looks, but it's important to value those technicians and communicate to them the value that they have on your brand to ensure that you're providing them with the tools, the safety, the information and insight, because they are the ones in front of the customers driving at that continued conversation that's going to bite off on that next contract. Lastly, it's also important to think about the fact that the work is becoming more and more complex and difficult for your technicians. If we value our technicians, if we recognize that a happy employee is going to drive a happy customer, that's going to drive it more revenue, we need to also recognize the stress that's involved with always being the one in front of a poor customer, someone who's upset, someone who had the power go out in their homes and the $500 worth of food is going to spoil for their families. And a technician showing up when there's a plumbing issue, and all you can think about is the rot that's going to happen after the flood happens in your house. Ensuring that you recognize that your technicians are in place in times of need for those end customers and equipping them with not just the applications and tools to do their job, but the support that says, we know the job you're doing is difficult. We want to make sure you have the on-demand knowledge and insights to be that hero and expert at the point of need. So you're not going back into the bed of your truck or calling another technician because you don't have the right answer. Again, as an analyst, we like to, from time to time, have predictions. We're often wrong. So again, if you want to quote me on this in a couple years, one of the predictions I came up with or thought through based off some data that I've been tracking is I do think that 3/4 of companies by next year are going to rethink the tools that they have in place to better schedule resources regardless of who is the resource going out. Not only are they going to have tools to ensure that their in-house technicians are scheduled appropriately to solve the right jobs, but they'll be able to leverage tools to recognize maybe that in-house technician isn't the right one to go visit that customer because we just need to get someone out there as quickly as possible to solve a problem. Or maybe we can delay sending out a technician because that customer is coming up for renewal in a week and a half. Can we schedule based off of parameters that take into account the fact that there's a revenue opportunity? I want my best technician to get on site. So I'll communicate to the customer. It's going to take maybe an extra 2 days, but you're going to be really satisfied by having technician A go out as opposed to just the closest tech with the right skills or the right tools. I really think there's an opportunity as we become more technology enabled to prioritize the work that needs to be done based off of the actual need that's in place, which isn't always just having the first person show up on time. There's been some discussion around thinking a little differently about how technology can enable the shift away from reactive service to something else. What I look at this slide is that I don't think we're going to get to a point where there's 0% reactive service. Going back to 15, 20 years ago when I started with this, thinking about field service management, often the discussion was we need to be fully predictive and prescriptive when we think about service outcomes and service model. I think there's going to be times when you're going to have legacy assets in the field, or you're going to have something that pops up that you couldn't quite predict that will need to be reactive. When I think about reactive, I don't look at it as a pejorative, that it's negative all the time. But when you are reacting to a service problem, you really want to make sure your technician is the best at that reaction, right? That when they are reacting to a failure that they didn't expect, that they will have the right part to solve the problem that first time. That reactive visit isn't then a secondary or tertiary visit. It's just that one reactive visit. One thing that I think is really important, again on this slide, and we've been tracking this data in 2025 and then 2 years prior and then in 2021, is there has been a shift up the slide to be more predictive and prescriptive. But one of the bigger concerns and challenges for businesses is the fact that they need to be able to rethink what good looks like for their business. Maybe they can't be fully autonomous and prescriptive. Prescriptive to me means that you have IoT, Internet of Things, connected assets. Those assets can tell you predictably that something's going to fail, and then autonomously something gets scheduled. So you're bypassing the human completely to schedule a work order and get someone out there to visit a business. I don't think we're there yet for most organizations. I do think there needs to be a human, what we call in the loop, to ensure that you're just being better at predicting the failure, and then a human is scheduling that technician visit. A few more buzzwords and themes. Again, as an analyst that likes to come up with interesting technology topics. First and foremost, a lot of your peers are rethinking their technology footprint and exploring the way in which they can modernize their technology. Obviously, you're at an event around technology. I do not work for Simpro, so I cannot directly recommend, but they're doing some great things on the road mapping currently. One thing to think about as you're looking at the Simpro offering and you're thinking about the vendors out in the market, there's a real desire to work with partners that can help you evolve at the pace in which you want to evolve. A lot of these trends on this slide don't take into account risk aversion, change management, take into account the fact that we're all in different points within our journey. One of the things I think is really valuable to come to conferences like this and to work with partners like a Simpro is they're really invested in the opportunity to partner as opposed to being a transaction that's buying off on the technology. When I think about a lot of these data points in this slide, these are evolving fairly quickly, and you need to understand that the bets you're picking today may not be the right bets for you in 6 months. But it's important to rethink your businesses, understand where you are today. What's your view around generative AI? Is it you just want to learn today and work with partners that can get you there when you're ready? When you think about the talent shortage, I know I've been talking about it for about 20 years now. There was a discussion around the aging workforce, and I forget the term that was used around the older people leaving the business. I would argue, I don't want to leave the business until I'm ready to leave the business, so let's not push everyone out that quickly. But the opportunity is to incentivize your more senior and experienced workers to gather a lot of the knowledge they have in their business and have the tools that allow for you to make that easy for them. No one wants to be the seasoned worker that said, okay, give me all your knowledge and put it in a database so that you can get rid of me sooner. Like, that's not going to go over very well. But I think there's a way in which you can think about these topics and these themes and the role that technology can play to ensure that that's an easier task that's being done that isn't combative with your teams. I think one of the areas that many analysts struggle with is that we often tell you which metric to care about. what's that golden KPI that's really important for your business? One of the areas that I think is really interesting when you think about the metrics and KPI that you're all measuring today is the fact that, in my view, it's not necessarily about which one you're measuring, it's about the connectivity between them. It's important to understand that the metrics and the functions within your organization really do interact and engage differently across the business. And you shouldn't think about your data as a silo, and you definitely shouldn't think about your KPI as a silo. It's important to understand what's the cost to your brand and how that is going to relate on your ability to drive any revenue streams. If you can't digitally transform your business, how is that going to impact your ability to understand your customers, lower the cost of operations, improve your employee engagement level? You can't think about just one metric and how that's going to interact on its own. It's really about how these metrics that you're measuring, the tools you're investing in, impact and interact with multiples within your organization. Here's another big data slide. There's a lot of data points on here, so feel free, again, to take pictures. What I wanted to highlight here, and we looked at organizations and their view around what drives success within their business. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the bottom of the slide was at the top of the slide. Organizations thought about mean time to repair. They thought about truck roll avoidance. When we continue to look at how business is evolving, how field service companies are evolving, how the aftermarket is evolving, there's been a shift to recognize the need that we need to focus on our technicians, our employees. We need to think about how we're satisfying our customers. We need to think about how we're driving at value to our customers, which is allowing us to retain these customers and drive more revenue from them. I think it's critical that we don't just think about our own operational efficiencies, but we think about the impact that this has on our customer relationships. How we think about the investments we're making in technology is going to impact our employees' ability to deliver those right outcomes to those customers. Again, historically on this slide, most of the conversation, again, this slide is asking, what are the service products you're offering to your customers? What do you plan on offering to your customers in the future? Historically, it was consumables and standard service contracts. One of the things that I'm really excited to see about this slide is as time has evolved, as data has evolved, as we've gotten smarter about what our customers will value, again, to move up that 10% profit margin curve, these more value-added services around training, consultation, remote monitoring, the ability to ensure that we're having a conversation with our customers to help their businesses grow, that's a value-add offering. That's something that if you start selling that margin goes up because your customers recognize that you're just not another transaction for them. You're just not selling them a standard contract. You'll see them twice a year. You'll buy off a consumable or part every now and then as a transaction. They understand that you're willing to partner with them to help them drive their businesses forward. You have data from all of your customers that says this is what you should be doing in your business. You're not maximizing the value of this offering or this contract that we have in place. I really think this is an open opportunity for many of us in this room to rethink the engagement model. What's not just the easiest product to sell a customer for your sales teams? I'm not a seller, but I knew oftentimes salespeople look at lowest hanging fruit. It's easy to sell consumables and parts. It's easy to sell a standard service contract. But that harder sell is actually the sell that's going to drive that partnership with your customer that they're willing to renew, that they're willing to pay a premium for. And understanding your customer buying behavior and what they see value in is, I think, crucial to your ability to drive at new revenue. We got pretty far without diving too deep into AI, but it is important for me to, as an analyst, not to have a discussion without talking about AI. One of the areas that I'm most intrigued by this discussion and this transformation is that many of your peers recognize that because in their customer world, we're using ChatGPT, we're thinking about how our Google devices at home or our Amazon Echoes can tap into data and give us information faster that's personalized for us. Within a field service space, that's also on the horizon. But one thing I like to take into account is it's not just about AI. It's not the whole story. I think it's where I want you to get beyond the buzzword or the theme around artificial intelligence or generative AI or agentic AI is the fact that it's providing you with recommendations that allow for you to improve your service offering. You can deliver better quality outcomes, faster service, if you have the insights off all that data you're getting to make a better set of decisions. If your technicians have on-demand knowledge and on-demand insights to have a different conversation with their customer, they're not just gonna fix that issue fast, they're gonna solve a problem for a customer that customer didn't even know they had. I really think the opportunity around AI isn't necessarily about just the cool, interesting language. It's about what it will offer us when we think about new revenue streams, when we think about better intelligence, when we think about better optimization and planning. As our businesses get more complex, we need to be able to be faster at the decisions we're making, take bigger sets of data, and make faster decisions that impact your business. And again, as an analyst, there's 10 things on this slide, and they're all important because they all should be. But what I would argue that the bottom of the slide doesn't mean it's the thing you shouldn't think about. It just means you have to do a lot all at the same time. And AI and augmented reality, these are all tools that allow for you to hit on all these themes, transform your business beyond just tackling one issue at a time. You can think about a closed loop of innovation. One of the areas that I continue to talk to when I talk to manufacturers is the fact that too often engineering design and the quality team doesn't know what's happening once an asset moves out of that very clean, white-coated office building that it's actually being used in the bowels of a hospital, or you're out at a mining or construction facility. You're thinking about what happens when you have legacy farm equipment interacting with new fully connected assets. I really think too often the back office suits that think we're really smart don't see what's happening in the field. And unless you're gathering that data and providing that data back to other functions within the organization, you're gonna continue to have your technicians go out and blame everything on someone else, right? But they're the eyes and ears of your organization. And with better data, better tools, and better insights, you'll be able to ensure that they can solve more problems. Again, I think your customers care about performance and reliability. They care about the outcome, not about the contract. And if you can share with them and show them that you can deliver on a better set of outcomes, they're more likely to continue to partner with you. So where are we today? I still think a number of organizations are trying to move across this continuum, this curve. I don't know where you are within your business, but I have a really cool slide and build. This is where the data says organizations are today when you think about maturity around their field service business. Another reason to think that we're not all laggards, we're not all poor performers, the majority of the organizations are in that middle piece. They've reached that point of being more proactive. We're no longer fully siloed when we think about our business functions and our field service teams. A decent number of organizations have moved to that right where they're predictive and more prescriptive. And I don't think one is necessarily bad and one's necessarily good. I think it's an opportunity to think about how technology can help you move to where you want your organization to be. Where are your customers wanting you? Do they need you to just be proactive and really, really good at being proactive? Do they want you to be prescriptive and willing to pay for that? I think you need to find out where your customers want to be. And this isn't a science project. It's not just data that's ambiguous. What I like to highlight on this slide is that there are organizations today that have recognized the value of technology, the recognition of how AI can transform their businesses, so they can actually sell the services that drive up the margin of their organization. These businesses on their website have very advanced service products that they're able to sell at a premium, that their sales teams, their marketing teams recognize how they can sell the value of those offerings to customers to drive at million-dollar businesses. And I think too often we think this is something in a textbook, it's something from an analyst saying that it can be done, and we forget that organizations actually have already invested in this. There's businesses across industries, HVAC, fire security, med device manufacturing, construction, consumer appliances. I really think everyone in this room can get to the point where you're leveraging technology to transform the business that you have in place, delivering a new set of value to customers. And it comes from everyone in this room. I think the executives in this room need to be the drivers of change within your organizations. Your technicians are willing to change and transform if you give them a reason to take on these new investments, to add technology into their day-to-day and really drive at insights that can help them be better equipped to deliver value to customers. Scary. AI, often this is what we've been promised. We've been promised this, it was discussed earlier, the humanoid that's going to actually get in a truck and go turn a wrench. And I, as much as I am an analyst, I'm a cynical optimist is what I call myself. I don't think we're going to be here anytime soon. AI is everywhere. It's going to continue to evolve and be everywhere as we get to that 2035 end of this curve. I do think it's an opportunity today. I do think the great things that Simpro is doing to ensure that they are embedding these tools into the applications that you're going to leverage are going to be impactful to your business. But most of us are still here, where we're having humans put hands on machines and do dirty, tough work that's very complex. What I think is the true opportunity is for us to ensure that we're moving from these pilots of interest in cool topics to success down the road. The biggest challenge that we continue to see within our research is that organizations are not moving to the right of this slide, where they've actually taken those really cool things that we talk about and have been successful at delivering value to their customers. Too often, we're still scrambling around these themes. What we're beginning to see is that organizations are pivoting to recognize what are the right bets to make around AI and how can AI actually fuel their businesses forward. But again, this isn't something that had to happen yesterday or 2 years ago when we started to think about generative AI, or earlier this year when guys like me started talking about agentic AI. It is something that you can build on your roadmap. It's something you can put within your businesses to think about where you're going to be in 2 to 3 to 5 years. Don't think that just because a suit is telling you that this is something that you should invest in today, it's something that's ready for you today. It may not be ready for you today. It's maybe something that you need to grow into. Half of organizations we find are thinking about how they can leverage AI within their strategy. It's above this red line that is so awesome when I build slides. I really think there's an opportunity for you to engage, embrace, and think about how AI can drive your businesses forward, but it's not something that you're too far off within your business. Even the largest organizations in the world still don't understand what they're going to do around AI. They're still facing the fact that this is something that could really transform their business in a negative or positive way. So despite the fact that we're continuing to tell you disruptions around, there's no real answers today. It's important for us to work together, partner together, to figure out where we're going to be. One thing that I think is awesome about this slide is those people that are doing nothing isn't very high, right? Everyone in this room can really jump aboard this journey to rethink what AI, artificial intelligence, generative can mean for your organizations. Again, from a maturity perspective, there's not a lot of organizations that have already done the fully baked idea. If you think about all these pieces, advisors, assistants, agents, co-pilots, there's no standard yet. There's still an opportunity for us to learn together and figure out what's going to work for our businesses. Only 7% of companies have no strategy today. Most of us need to think that we're early on a roadmap, figure out what are the pitfalls to avoid. Let's not have silos of insights. Let's think about an organizational enterprise-wide strategy to drive forward and maximize the value of this technology. And it all comes down to not just investing in AI so that 50% of organizations started there, but the rest of the businesses recognize it's about how AI can drive at revenue, how it can cut costs, and how it can help you improve the quality outcomes that you're delivering for customers. And quickly, as my time runs up, these are some of the things that you should think about prioritizing within your business. But figure out where you are. Figure out what is your opportunity. I break down generative AI, artificial intelligence into 3 big buckets for field service. One, it's what can your technicians do? So how can we ensure they have better summarization tools, better on-demand knowledge? How can we ensure that when they get on site, they can fix the problem the first time? What is your customer doing around self-service? Can we equip them with the recommendations so they're not going into an FAQ on your website, they're not calling a 1-800 number, they're not trying to get access to Google to figure out how to solve this complex problem. You're giving them the tools that they can actually solve a lot of their problems on their own, avoiding that truck roll, or maybe diagnosing that problem better so you roll the right truck with the right technician based off that self-service opportunity. And in that community, can we think about how AI and technology and automation can help drive better engagement, tap into information that you're not getting from your technician that gives that in-person feedback survey. But you're able to tap into what's actually happening in the market and what do your customers care about. So as we wrap up, I think everyone in this room should consider being a champion of change. Think about the way in which you can leverage all the brain power in this room to understand what are the best practices for your business and drive at a new opportunity for how you can grow. I'd be bad at my job if I didn't tell you to start today. I do think you don't have to get to the point where you were tapping into what someone did 5 years ago. I think you can start today and move pretty quickly. I do think the technologies evolve fast enough to become really ready-made for your businesses, your industry, and you have the tools now and the partners now to actually start on that journey right now. One of another quote that I pulled from some research I did was really interesting, where companies realize that there's such a big potential around digital transformation and technology, and their customers do want them to help along that journey. Your customers, your teams are willing to take part in these technologies. There's not as much of friction when you think about leveraging technology because we all use it in our day-to-day, and so you can start today. But focus on the practical. The hype is interesting, and in my world, in my line of business, it's how I make money to talk about how interesting technology is around a hype cycle. But there's so much we can do to innovate with the practical within our businesses. You know your customers, you know your technicians, you know where you are from a risk aversion perspective. Focus on the practical transformation that can drive for that incremental business growth today. And then down the road, once you get enough buy-in from your organization, you can do that big leap where that humanoid's the one out there in the field, which again, I don't think is happening anytime soon. And finally, it's important to embrace AI with purpose. Again, I think it's really cool technology. I think there's a real opportunity for this to transform every business in this room. It's transforming the work I do, but it should come with purpose. It should come with value. It should come with improving the workers that are using the technology, improving your customer relationships, and not just AI for AI's sake. So with that, I think I've gone over my time by 3 minutes, so I don't think we have time for questions. My answers to questions are actually better after a whiskey anyway, so we can always move ourselves into the next room. But thank you for your time today. Hopefully the data was helpful. Feel free to ask me questions after the session. Thank you.